To wrap up our discussion of sampling strategies, we're going to talk about the cluster sample. It sounds a little bit like the stratified sample to start. We divide our population into small groups, or groups, the groups can actually be pretty large, called clusters. Then we randomly select some of the clusters and choose all of the elements in those clusters. And that's the difference between the cluster and the stratified sample. In the stratified sample, you choose some elements from each group. In the cluster sample, you pick different groups and then survey or measure every element of those groups. So again, I've broken the cereals down by brand. So now the brands will be our clusters. So I have 3, so Post will be 1. Let's see, these are the General Mills, so 1 is Post, 2 are our General Mills. Then finally, the third group will be our Kellogg cereals. So now I'm supposed to randomly select some of the clusters, and we're going to choose all of those elements. Since I only have 3 clusters, I'm just going to randomly select one of them. And then that cluster will be our sample. It's kind of interesting. Here's, I don't know what size my sample will be until I select a cluster. So, going back to my random sample generator. And it's the General Mills cereal. So now all of the elements in this cluster become my sample. In a cluster sample, you can choose more than one cluster. Since I only had 3, I don't want to pick more than one. But oftentimes you divide your population into many clusters and then pick several clusters, and then every element of those clusters becomes your sample. And that wraps up our conversation on sampling strategies. You'll find your author's description of them in a nice diagram on page 29. At the very bottom of page 29, your author describes multi-stage sampling, where we use multiple of these strategies to generate a sample from a very large population.